Welcome to the Register's Report. My name is John Buckley. I'm the Register of Deeds of Plymouth County. This show is about Plymouth County real estate. Our headline for the month was Recordings Continue to Trend Upward. We're taping this show in August. We're reporting on the July recordings at the registry. I have a great guest, Greg Hanley, who will be speaking about the increased cost of building supplies affecting real estate, and then some of our county and colonial history. So let's get right to the numbers. So sales were up, 747 deeds recorded in July, compared to 719 in June, and 7% more than last year. We're up 5% year to date. The average sale price is very high across some very diverse communities, $746,381. You'll see a bar chart of all of the sales from Abington to Whitman, 27 communities, and Plymouth and Brockton have the highest number of sales. Our mortgage numbers are very good. They've gone up fairly well. 377 mortgages recorded in July, more than the 1234 in June, 12% more than last July, and year to date, up 12%. Thankfully, foreclosure issues are very calm right now. Throughout the 27 communities in Plymouth County, there are only 4 foreclosure deeds recorded, and 4 in July, 8% in June of last year, but we're down significantly since COVID, when there was a foreclosure moratorium in place. The lenders really haven't picked up the pace. You'll see the first document that comes to us relative to foreclosures. There were 32 foreclosure notices among the 27 communities in Plymouth County, which is also very low, and a bar chart where you see a lot of zeros of foreclosure deeds in orders of notice. A foreclosure deed is when a lender has taken back property, usually for failure to pay, could be a medical issue, a job issue. And an order of notice is the first document we get that somebody's in trouble. We have a partnership with NeighborWorks that takes these orders of notice and sends out a letter to the homeowner and asks if they want some help from them. If you're facing difficulty, don't wait. Take care of it as soon as you possibly can. You have to be very diligent as a homeowner because there are a lot of people out there trying to scam you because it is your most valuable asset. In this segment of the show, we've always done something educational in nature. We've had surveyors, appraisers, commercial real estate brokers, and a whole lot of realtors. Last month I had attorney John McCluskey and realtor Bill Callahan talking about the opportunity when you downsize to put your property into trust, and they talked about different versions of that, and I know it was well received because I had some great comments. In this segment of the show today, I have a person who is very involved in the sale of product used in building houses and apartment buildings. Greg Hanley has been a guest before. For years, he was on the state plumbing board, and he works right now for a private plumbing company. His side job is as a Plymouth County Commissioner. Greg, good to see you.
Sometimes I wonder if that's a side job, John.
Well,
you know,
we all have different days.
Yeah, that's true.
Whether it's good or not.
Well, thanks for having me.
Sure.
I'm glad
Why don't
to talk.
you give them a little background about your company and the status of what's going on out there these days?
Yep, I've been in the plumbing supply business for the last 35 years, starting with a family business with P.V. Sullivan Supply out of Quincy.
Yep.
And then I left them to have my own supply house, RLX Supply, out of Arlington. I currently am employed by Economy Plumbing out of Mattapan, and I'm their commercial salesman. So I've been in the business for about that long, and as you mentioned, my time under Deval Patrick on the State Plumbing Board was for 9 years, and dealing with plumbing code and all of that. Today, I'm glad to talk to you from a couple points of view. I'm also a Massachusetts Chief Procurement Officer, and recently had sat with the Office of the Inspector General to talk about the cost implications of the tariffs and the construction costs that are being inflated by the tariffs that are being imposed, and creates an unnecessary hardship for communities who go out to bid on a project. And as it turns out, through no fault of their own, there's cost escalations. And what those cost escalations don't take into account is that when a job goes out for bid and you have a number of finalists, they then take that bid price and they go to borrow the money. And a lot of projects are midway through their cycle of construction, and what we're finding now with the cost increase is the impact goes back to the municipality that's performing the public project. On the private side, we see cost escalations with the different types of materials that are residentially based, petroleum-based products like PVC pipe and things like that are on the rise, and they're tied to a fuel index. And so when the cost escalations go globally, especially in petroleum, there's a lot of byproducts that are made in the plumbing supply business that are plastic-based. You know, so we're seeing a lot of up and down. It's hard to keep track of things as a wholesaler to know when we should buy our materials so that at least we can stay ahead of the curve and plan properly for our customers' needs.
So I know you've been pretty active in sales as of late, despite the fact that housing in particular has kind of been flat for a while.
Yeah, we're seeing that, and maybe there's some relief on the horizon with the Fed possibly dropping the rate, but that is a Band-Aid on a heart attack,
Right.
As far as I'm concerned. Globally, we are in a world economy, and the products that we exchange to other countries and export are now being tariffed as well with reciprocity, and it's really not helping any of us, to be honest with you.
So in your case, it's mostly it's plumbing supplies.
Correct, plumbing and heating,
Okay.
where my job is commercial, so I do the big Class A construction.
Including
buildings.
boilers and all that.
Boilers, water heaters, air handlers, mini splits. We have a pretty big company. We're diversified enough. We do about 40 million in sales annually from all types of construction. My forte just happens to be commercial, and whether it's public or private, the cost escalations for those materials that are imported, especially from our neighbors to the north, the Canadian government, and what they export to us by way of copper and aluminum and things like that,
Never mind
precious
the
metals.
lumber, right?
Exactly. So, you know, I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's important for us to highlight it from the public point of view. You've got a number of capital projects here in the city of Brockton that are in various stages of completion, and if you're a contractor who has bid the work and now these prices are coming out that are really to the point where a contractor may have to choose between finishing the job or walking away, because at this point, if there's no relief from the federal government or the state government on these things, there has to be some allowance for change orders. And what does that mean? It hits the taxpayer right in the wallet. And even on the residential side, if you were thinking you were going to put that nice addition on your home, you may think twice about it until times get better. So I don't know what the answer is. Right now, we just happen to be in a world situation where this global economy is being impacted.
Yeah. Well, clearly, you know, as an outsider to that industry, just watching the way the tariffs have been fluctuating on all these other countries, Canada in particular.
Well, I'll give you a scenario. Back in March, there was a threat of a tariff at a
Yeah.
certain percentage,
Yeah.
50% I think it was.
Yes.
And so ahead of that, my manufacturers have to plan for the future. It's a futures commodity kind of driven market. And when they see that there's a 50% tariff being thrown out there, they plan accordingly, and all of a sudden there's a price increase.
Yeah.
So then if that tariff doesn't come through at what it was promised to be at 50%, and now it's at 25%, the folks that purchased their materials now, believe it or not, thinking they were going to be proactive, are now taking it because now it's at 25%.
Taking a hit.
Yeah, they're taking a hit. And so it's frustrating. You know, I'm hoping that the Office of the Inspector General, who coaches and counsels people in procurement and contracts, that there may be some sort of relief to how the bid laws work. And that's the trickle-down part of it, is because what are you going to do? Are you going to finish the project, or are you going to abandon it? And that's not a choice that municipalities want when it comes to building something that they've been probably waiting for 15, 20 years for a new school or a new library, a new public safety building. You know, it's just very frustrating.
So as a builder puts their package together, they build all these costs in, and then they probably look for prices from
Correct.
companies like yours, and they try to do best by their customer.
Absolutely, and that, it really works as a partnership when you're in the wholesale business to work with your contractor. If your contractor gets the work and you bid the work to them, you typically get the work. But what's happening now, from my point of view, is in good faith, I bid the project, the cost escalation comes, now my contractor, who's been loyal to me,
Right.
is forced to potentially go to my competition to see if there's a better
Right.
price after I've already expended the sweat, written the
And
purchase
you
order.
did the work putting it
And we did the
together.
work. And do you blame them? You know, I can't take it out on my competition. Everyone has to eat. And the bottom line is you have to be really wise on your purchasing choices as someone who's in the supply house business. You know, we like to warehouse our products. We put our money in our inventory and not in the bank. And that has been the secret to our success. But as you dwindle that inventory, you then have to replace it. So there's replacement costs. So what I was selling to you yesterday for $10, if I have to replace that item, it's right now at $15
Right.
for something you bought yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, so it's tricky, and I'm concerned. You know, for the
So
residents.
going forward, maybe there'll be some stability in the tariffs. But if you're a builder, I really wonder what you're thinking about for this next year coming up, because you're planning that far ahead, and whether you're going to take on a project, land costs, permitting, time, and now you have this wild card in your materials.
We've offered a couple of programs within our own company. We have an abundance of 52-foot trailers
Okay.
that if we can pre-purchase, get approved by the municipality for stored materials,
Okay.
we can actually put that tractor trailer
Okay.
on site
Yeah.
so that the municipality can have their clerk of the works come
Yeah.
by, check the inventory, see that
Yeah.
and then the contractor gets paid, and then the wholesaler gets paid.
Okay.
And then the manufacturer gets paid.
Yeah.
So there are ways to do it. They're creative. Then you have to worry about theft, liability, all of those things that add costs as well, hidden costs. So it's going to be a tricky environment. And you know, if you've got a project that has to potentially go on hold because of it, it might be the better way to do things. If you look at how the federal government has worked on projects that are already in the queue that they're abandoning more for
Sure.
whatever reason, I mean, it's a difficult time to be in this business for sure.
There are some projects I saw in the news last night that are 3/4 built and not sure whether they'll be finalized.
And that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
Because here you're spending good money, and if you have to then pivot and not finish the project, what do you do with the resources that were already spent? Is it not better to finish the project and then, you know, live with the consequences then?
Well, we're clearly in the first year of a 4-year term for the national administration. I'm wondering whether it'll stabilize as we get into the next year.
Well, in concept, I kind of believe in the Buy American thing,
Yeah.
and I would like to see, you know, manufacturing come back to this country. I think that was the intention of it, but the unintended consequences that now that we're such a global economy, that we're dependent upon other countries' resources. So whether there's a trade deficit or not, I think the idea of bringing manufacturing here was the idea. However, because it's now established in these other countries, it now becomes a burden for us to retool, to build manufacturing plants. And this is going to take a generation. It's not going to be done in the next 4 years. Even if everything was okayed and permitted and ready to go, that's going to take a generation for that concept to take place. And do we kill the whole program along the way while we're waiting? And that's the difficult balance that we have to have.
So most people don't deal with your level of the work. It's mostly contractors and builders that you deal with?
Yes. So my competition in the residential world will be like a Home Depot or a Lowe's. So even if you're doing your own projects and doing your own work at your home, you're seeing costs rise there. And if there is product on the shelf that was already on the shelf, you won't realize it until you need to replace that it's really going to have the impact, and those tariffs hit you right in the pocket. You know, so I don't know what the answer is. You know, we're continuously trying to improve. I think the key is communication back in a constructive way, not a political way, not a negative way. And we're just pointing out, here is a project that was built and bonded for $100 million that because of the tariffs are now going to add 20% to those costs. So now that $100 million job is a $120 million job. And who pays that? It's the taxpayer. And if you're doing Home Depot or Lowe's, who's paying for that? You, the consumer.
Yeah.
So where's the win-win there, you know? But that's where we are.
So give me an idea of your top 5 customers.
My top 5 customers are union and non-union contractors. My largest account right now does primarily public work, schools, for the most part. A lot of my contractors will do the big buildings down in Boston, the skyscrapers. And then there's a segment of that, once it is built, that will do the tenant fit-outs. So right now, based on what was already funded and approved, we see the end of a boom. If you look at the Seaport development, we were involved in every aspect of that on grade A commercial construction, and that is making this state just boom with prosperity, because now we're a hub of tourism, and it's a beautiful outcome of what used to be there, if you recall.
I remember those days,
On the South
really
Boston
like 3
Waterfront.
places you would go to back in those days.
Yeah, Anthony's Pier 4, Jimmy's Harborside, and Lucky Stavin, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's a tremendous impact, economic development, taxation. You think about all of the opportunities that are there that drive our economy, and then you have to support residential housing down there. You know, it's funny, when you think back to COVID, there was a lot of buildings that were built that required companies to have brick and mortar space. And I think what we learned during COVID was the fact that now you could do things by Zoom. You could do things remotely from home. So the need for bricks and mortar for office space then dwindled. However, the good thing about the Commonwealth is they put an emphasis on residential. And whether it's Class A or stick frame, you're now looking at opportunities that buildings were built and the space is vacant. So if we can then take those existing buildings and turn them from office space into residential, you've created a kind of a phantom
So I know
economy.
Boston has been focusing on taking all those big empty downtown commercial properties and trying to get them the funding to make a conversion. It has to be involving, an office building doesn't have as many bathrooms or as residential would, things like that.
Well, you know, it's funny. So this is interesting the way you just phrased that. You know, at the county, as you're familiar with, we did the ARPA program. Okay, and if you look at what we were able to give out countywide on projects that communities, you know, were planning for, but really didn't have the bandwidth or the financial resources to do it, we jump-started the economy, and we were able to distribute $113 million for worthy projects with broadband, water and sewer, and you know, community standard projects that the resources were available for, and we were very lucky. But now we're coming at the end of ARPA,
Yeah.
and now this could be a perfect storm where the tariffs and ARPA ending could even create more havoc. So,
Yeah.
I think there's an answer. I think we need to work with our
I don't
delegations.
think we're going to see, with this administration, a big program like that coming out for a long time.
Well, it's interesting because if you recall, believe it or not, I gotta give the devil his credit,
Yeah.
during the first Trump administration, during COVID, he created the CARES
Right,
Act,
sure,
which
you're right.
was the one that also Plymouth County took advantage of, and it more or less was COVID response. However, there was upgrades to HVAC, things like that, that protected air filtering and
Yeah.
the spread of the
Oh, right,
disease.
right.
So we had distributed a lot of money to the city of Brockton, and it was used to, City Hall got upgraded as a result of that, and it was a kind of a boom because it needed to be upgraded to begin with, but with the help of the federal government, Mr. Trump had put it out there, but then Mr. Biden put, ARPA together.
Yeah,
So
right.
between the two, the federal government can do it.
Did step up.
It's a matter of cooperation at the end of the day. If you can get the House and the Senate and the President all to just kind of put all that politics aside and focus on the American people, I think at the end of the day, the problem can be solved,
So where do we go as we get into the new year?
Well, so we deal with a lot of economists,
Yep.
and we look at commodity markets. And right now, for us as a wholesaler, we're taking advantage of pre-price escalation buys, and we're putting our money into inventory. However, once we acquire it, we are not going to let it go for the bottom dollar, because now we have to, pay for our overhead.
Right.
So if we land bank or bank our commodities and let them go for a higher price, that's what we have to do to keep the doors open. So when we look at the actuaries, and a lot has to do, believe it or not, with the federal government on interest rates, and it's interesting how that's coming down, but does that then create more inflation? There's a lot of metrics that go into what we have to deal with. Yep.
Thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great. So I want to thank Greg Hanley, a professional salesman of building supplies, talking about the impact tariffs and other economic activity has had on the increased costs of materials used for housing, both residential and commercial. Something to be very concerned of, particularly when you're publicly bidding a job at one rate and then the cost goes higher, or when you're getting a contractor to give you a price on a home or an addition and then the cost goes higher. You have to pay a lot of attention to that. In this segment of the show, we always do something a little lighter in nature, some of our great Plymouth County history. National Lighthouse Day was the 7th, National Beach Day was the 30th, but today we're going to talk about, on the county records, some of our great lighthouses here in Plymouth County. So there's a lighthouse at the entrance to Plymouth Harbor called Plymouth Light or Gurnet Light. Originally, they were twin lights, and they were built in 1768. The first lighthouse was a wooden dwelling, and early in those years, it was owned by John and Hannah Thomas. John Thomas went off to fight in the Revolutionary War, and he was killed in action. So Hannah Thomas, his wife, was named as the first woman lighthouse keeper in America, first female lighthouse keeper in America. During the Revolutionary War, the town of Plymouth, Duxbury, and Kingston also erected a fort on the Gurnet. Hannah and her son John later sold the lighthouse to the United States government, but it is currently cared for by a private entity, Project Gurnet and Bug Light. There's also a beautiful lighthouse out there called Bug Light, if you're ever in Plymouth Harbor on Saquesh Beach or out in Plymouth Harbor. The next lighthouse is another famous lighthouse. It's the Situate Lighthouse. It's a lighthouse built on Cedar Point in 1811. Simeon Bates was the first lighthouse keeper. But during the War of 1812, when America was back at war with England, a British frigate came trying to enter Situate Harbor. A lot of people were off fighting in that war. However, the lighthouse keeper's daughter, Rebecca and Abigail Bates, were able to muster some of the older people left in town, make a lot of noise with a fife and drum, a lot of stamping of feet, and the British frigate thought that they were an army mustering, so they chose not to enter Situate Harbor to plunder the town. And that began the legend of the American Army of Two. So at the Situate Lighthouse, you'll see the story on a plaque when you go there. And to this day, there have been reports on dark, stormy, foggy nights that the sound of the fife and drum have come out over the rushing waters. Last but not least of our lighthouses is Boston Light. Boston Light is located on Little Brewster Island. It's America's oldest lighthouse station. For 300 years, it's shone over Boston Harbor. And it is in the Boston Harbor Island National Park. It belongs to the town of Hull, in the town of Hull. And the 300th anniversary celebrated the National Park Service 100th anniversary. It is a famous historical location. It has been replaced after one was knocked down in a storm. It was operated by the Coast Guard since 1939 and is on the National Register of Historic Places. We also have talked about one of our colonial records. Plymouth Colony was founded on the arrival of the Mayflower in Plymouth in 1620. The original Plymouth Colony extended all the way through Barnstable in Bristol County, including Plymouth County. In this particular document, in 1681, the colonial court authorized a gentleman by the name of Jabez Howland to run a liquor establishment in the town of Bristol, Rhode Island. It was a home that provided substance, liquor and rum and everything together with that, as well as lodging. But it was licensed by the Plymouth Colony Court. Clearly, those stories are great. We love to tell stories of our history. I want to thank the folks here at Brockton Cable Access. This is my 179th show. Michelle Hebsche worked with me today and did a great job keeping my show moving and keeping me on time as best she could. And I want to wish everyone a great end of the summer, a happy Labor Day, and I'll see you next month.